One of the first groups of confirmands that I helped prepare for their confirmation really stuck out at me. And no particular reason. It was a group of mixed ages, smaller group. They were very well behaved, took in everything I had to say. The one person in particular, we'll call him Christopher, really took notice of what we were doing, of everything that we were learning. He really absorbed everything that was going on. And I saw a little bit of myself in Christopher. I had in my own experience as a confirmand, I tried to listen, tried to soak in everything that we were taught. And I remember, after all that time, after all that preparation, just feeling the presence of the Spirit coming upon me as our bishop laid his hands on me. And so I kept an eye out, because I suspected that Christopher would have a similar moment, just because of how much he was absorbing, how much he was paying attention, how clearly invested he was in everything we were learning. So we get to the day of confirmation, and we're gathered after the confirmation, after the service, for the reception. The interesting thing is it wasn't Christopher who had this deep, this life-changing moment, similar to what I had had before. It's actually his sister, who we'll call Samantha. I could look into her eyes and see how much this moment had meant for her. She was happy and ecstatic and open and sharing about her own experience, her own sense of God's presence, the Spirit coming upon her in this confirmation. You could tell that for her, this event was life-changing. Now, the Holy Spirit doesn't act in ways that we would expect. It surprises us all the time. That's the lesson I learned in my own experience. It's what our lessons teach us today. It's really what the day of Pentecost is all about. We see this first in Numbers. And there, God's Spirit is being poured out on all the elders. These were people who were called to help Moses in his ministry. Because even back then, ministers, well, Moses really, were stretched thin. He was stretched thin and he needed help. And so God helped raise up these 70 elders to be those people to help Moses, to help Moses deal with the Israelites, with their constant complaining as they go from slavery in Egypt to freedom in the wilderness and their long 40-year trek to the land that God has promised them. Now, these 70 elders, these are the ones who God has appointed to help Moses. And so as a sign of the Spirit that God is pouring on them, that is resting on them, to mark them as those who will help Moses, we see all of them prophesying, if only just for a little bit of time. Now, all these 70 elders are gathered, all, that is, except two, Eldad and Medad. These two elders were still in the camp. They weren't gathered where the rest of the elders were. And at this time, when God's Spirit comes down, these too, in the camp, are prophesying as well, even though they aren't gathered where they're supposed to be. God still recognized them as part of this group. Now, the prophesying in the camps, these camps set up because, again, the Israelites are still in the wilderness. They don't have a set and settled home. Joshua, son of Nun, who has been Moses' assistant, who will be the heir to Moses in leadership over the people as they enter into that land promised them. Joshua realizes that this is out of the norm. That this is not how things were expected to be. And so immediately goes to Moses and reports about Eldad and Medad to him. Moses, though, realizes the joy in this event. His wish, what he says to Joshua, is that wouldn't it be great if everyone, if all the people of Israel were found worthy? If all could be like these 70 elders? If all could prophesy? If all could be leaders of God's people? How much better would things be? Now, again, the elders only temporarily experienced this influx of the Spirit, this ability to prophesy. And this is actually something we see later in the Tanakh, the Old Testament. Something we see with the very first king of Israel, Saul. Saul, too, in being anointed with this infusing of the Spirit, for just a limited amount of time, starts to prophesy. There's some who believe that what we hear in the Gospel according to John mirrors what's going on here, where we hear that the Spirit had not yet come. Some believe that that's the sense of that is that the Spirit was not yet here in a permanent abiding presence with people. That would come later, that would come after the resurrection. So what Jesus is saying at this point, what Jesus is saying in the Gospel according to John, what he's saying about the Spirit is not something that the people would have understood quite yet, because they wouldn't have yet seen God working in this way through them, through the Spirit. We do get to see the Spirit working fully in this world on the day of Pentecost, as we hear about it in the Acts of the Apostles. Now we see the Spirit resting on the apostles in a new and completely unexpected way. These apostles, in their prophecy, will do so again. The tongues they speak of are even later referred to as one of the common gifts of the Spirit by Paul in 1 Corinthians. And even more miraculously, the Spirit's manifestation among the apostles is one that reaches out to others, enticing them to come closer to God, enticing them to one day receive this very same Spirit. And everyone present in this event, no matter where they are from, understood the apostles, each in their own languages. Everything the apostles are saying is fully understood. people don't understand, though, is how this is even possible. They blame new wine because there's nothing else that they can think of that could explain such a miraculous and mysterious event. But as our psalm reminds us today, God is one of mystery and wonder. God creates many and mysterious things, like the myriad of creatures that we still don't know about, that we still have yet to discover and see in our own oceans even today. And other majestic creatures, like the large behemoth, the Leviathan. Now, at the same time, what God is doing has been foretold before. We just didn't understand it at the time. As Peter tells the people gathered on the day of Pentecost, the prophet Joel spoke of this day, spoke of a day when the Spirit would be poured out on all flesh. And that day has happened now. The Spirit, as the psalm tells us, will renew the face of the earth. Through the Spirit, God is constantly working something new. God is creating, recreating, mending, and restoring. We don't know how the Spirit will work in the world. We cannot predict God's actions. And that is what our experience teaches us, if only we will take the time to listen. It is what our lessons teach us today as well. We don't always know how God will act. And it's okay that we don't know. It's okay because we are for the better because of God's actions in this world. That's what we see with Moses and the elders today. It's what we see in the story of the day of Pentecost. God doesn't always fit into our plans. That's okay too, because God's plan is better than ours. God isn't confined to our parameters. And that's okay. It's okay for God to exceed our limits. The day of Pentecost is about surprises. It's about what God is doing that is new and unexpected. And it's up to us to keep our eyes and our ears open to paying attention to what it is that God is doing in this world. Otherwise, we will miss out on what God is doing. For God's works are unpredictable and new. We can never expect to know or anticipate what it is that might be worked through us, what it is that God might be doing through us in this world.